Oh, hey, how's it going? Just got my new Perception Pilot here, and I was going to start the rigging process. But before I do that, there's a couple things about the kayak that I'd like to mention regarding the drive system. So if you're interested in that, let's just go have a look at that now. Okay, so the drive has got all the new updates with it that fixed all the problems that people were having before. The propeller, which used to have a problem with it slipping, now they've gone and put a roll pin here through the propeller and then right through the shaft. So now it's impossible for the propeller to slip on the shaft. So that's that fix. And they also came with the updated pin with the cotter key so that it can't, the pin can't work itself out. So that's all good. The one thing I really wanted to point out about the drive is, now I didn't make a video of this and I probably should have. The gear case here and the one here, I actually, on both ends, I took these 4 bolts out and slipped that apart and found out that the only grease that was in there was a little bit of grease right on the gears themselves, and the rest of the casing, was pretty much empty of grease. So there was grease in there from the factory, but it's only on the gears themselves. So I went ahead and purchased some marine grease. Used pretty much all of the tube to mostly fill this gear case and mostly fill this gear case. So I have a little bit of empty space in there, but I'm guessing that after I put it all back together, when the grease would maybe slump down or whatever, that it's completely submerged the gears here and completely submerged the gears here in grease. So should be pretty well lubricated in there now. I suggest if anybody's got one of these or is thinking about buying one, I don't think it's a major issue. Maybe it's even something you could have your dealer check out if you're not comfortable taking it apart or whatever. But I don't think it would hurt to kind of pre-service that drive to make sure there's plenty of grease in there, and then I don't think you'll have any problems down the road in the future. I actually haven't had this kayak on the lake yet because our lakes are still frozen, but I don't think it's going to be an issue. Seems to pedal smooth and everything now with lots of grease in there. Not that there was really a problem with it before, but I feel a little more confident in it now, that knowing that there's lots of grease in the casing, both casings. So that's about it on the drive. Like I said, all the updated parts are there. I did go ahead and make a little adjustment here on these brackets here to make sure that pin was good and snug against the drive when it's deployed. So pretty basic kind of stuff. Other than that, the kayak's really good. I'm pretty happy with my purchase so far. So now I'm just kind of excited to get rigging and get it ready for some fishing here. So maybe we'll start on some stuff here. Stick around. The first thing I want to do on this kayak is install a hatch. So what I've done is purchased this hatch from Amazon, and I think I'm going to put it in here, and I think that'll work good. So the hatch is roughly, I don't know, almost ½ an inch thick, I guess, altogether, from where it will actually mount on the kayak surface to the top of it. So there is a little bit of an issue with the bar on the chair. Actually has a little bit of space here but not half an inch. Not the way it sits anyways. There is quite a bit of flex in the kayak material here. And I think maybe once it's installed and then, you know, the weight of somebody sitting in the seat just pushes that a little bit. I think the chair should settle back in. And if it doesn't, then that'll be an issue that we'll address afterwards. I have a couple little ideas of how to resolve that problem if it's a big problem. Okay, so I think we'll just go ahead and get started on this hatch. Oh, I just wanted to mention about the hatch. It's a 9x12. And actually, you know what? It's pretty well made, actually. I'm actually quite happy with it. The plastic is extremely durable, feels like. It's got a bit of a rubbery, almost kind of feel to it, so I think it's going to be pretty durable that way. It's very flexible. It seems to latch down nice. The lid seems to close nice. Got a stainless steel hinge. Yeah, so I think it'll be good. First thing we're going to do is get rid of this bungee out of the way for a minute, or for a little while. I'll put that back in there after. A couple other things I want to talk about. Now, obviously there's this recess in the kayak. This end here is about 7/8 of an inch deep, actually. It's quite deep right here. So that's going to be something we'll need to address as far as sealing that. This one is the same kind of issue, but it's very shallow. It's maybe 3/8 of an inch or so. That one should be fairly easy to take care of. The other thing I want to do, I think, is I'm just going to do a mod on this hatch a little bit. I would like to have a screw in the center here of each of these ends, so that will pass right through. Well, I'm actually not going to use screws. I'm going to use machine screws, stainless steel. So I'm going to pass those little bolts right through. Put washers and nuts on the backside, some locking, maybe some Teflon locking nuts or something like that. And just to clamp that together, like especially where that recess and stuff is, just to clamp that all. I'll put sealant around there, of course, but just to clamp it all together, make it solid and secure and as watertight as possible. I got some scraps of material here in the shop, and I'm going to take some measurements of this lip that drops into the kayak here, and I'm going to cut myself a template out of some 1/4 inch MDF that I have laying around here, just to allow me to set my template on here and square it up with everything in the kayak and have the hole exactly where I want it, and I can mark it with a marker and cut it out. So when I measure this, I'm going to make my template just slightly larger than what this measures, so that I'm not fighting to get this in there after, but I don't want it too loose that it slops around in there lots either. So, you know, maybe at the most of 1/8 of an inch bigger each way. And that'll be good, I think, as far as template goes. I'm going to try to have my lip of my hatch here line up right at that edge of that recess in there. I got some foam rubber that I'm going to use to build this up, and I'll make the foam rubber the piece so that it's the same width as this flange here, and I'll put sealant in there, and I'm going to stick it down in there, and of course it'll have sealant coming across the top, and then when I put my bolt through it, I'll squish it all together. Plus, having it right up against here will keep it and that foam from ever being able to kick out that way, because it's such a tall piece that it probably is better that if it's supported here a little bit. And of course, the flange on the inside will keep it from going the other way. So
That should work good.
Okay, so what I need is 10 and 7/16 by 7 and 7/16. So I'm just going to start by squaring this piece up. I want it nice and square. I just marked it here and here. I didn't go right to the corner because we're not going to cut the corners out square. We're just going to stay back from the corners a little bit here. So that basically marks out the dimensions of the inner lip. Now this space here, from here to here, is 7/8 of an inch, and that's what it measures on the hatch. When I measure here, that's 7/8 of an inch. So that is the area that's going to be covered by the upper flange, and that'll be the area that I put my foam into, my super high density foam that I have. I'm not even sure where I got it from, but it's like a 3M peel and stick foam, but it's like super stiff, and you can hardly even squish it with your fingers. And I'm going to put a nice thick layer of that in there. I'll trim it down so it fits pretty well flush, maybe a little bit above flush because it will compress a little bit. And then I'll put sealant down through here and then sealant over top of it after I put the foam in, and then when I set the hatch in, the sealant should compress and do its job. So I'm going to grab some tools here, drill out the corners. I'm going to drill the corners out with a hole saw. We don't want square corners because the hatch has screws right on the corners, so we want as much material there as possible. I'm going to get a hole saw that matches that radius right there. And then I'm going to drill out, I'm going to measure, and I'm going to drill out those corners, and then I'll finish the cuts. I've got like a sonic tool, and I'm going to cut the rest of the cuts out with the sonic tool. It's easy to control. And the other reason you don't want to cut the corners square is sometimes on material like this, plastic and different kinds of things like that, if you cut to a square corner, it leaves a spot where the plastic can start to tear. It'll tear right at the corner and start wandering off sometimes if you get a crack or something like that. When you have a radius in the plastic like that, that gives it a lot more strength, and we should never have to worry about, from standing on this or walking on this or sitting on this, should never have to worry about that corner, any cracks running off from the corners. I'm measuring from the inside of the marker line, here, here, and here, from the inside edge of it, because that's the outside edge of our template. I'm going to just drill out the holes, the center holes here first with a small bit, like an 1/8 inch. It's just a lot easier to find those holes later with the hole saw. and not get out of whack. Start slow, kind of hold up on the drill a little bit so that it's not just plowing right in. Let it spin and kind of find its place. Rotate it from side to side a little if you need to. Okay. Pull those holes out. So now it's up to the sonic tool to finish the job here. So this thing where the screw goes in to hold the bungee, that's actually a sealed thing. It doesn't, there's a little bit of a dimple in here that drops down, and that's a place to accommodate the screw, I guess. It's all sealed in plastic, so it's watertight. And so is that one, the back. Yeah, these little plastic plugs, I don't know what purpose they would have. Something to do with the molding process, I'm guessing. So there's the hole. I'm going to clean this up with a shop vac and then test that out. I got it all vacuumed and I cleaned the edges up here with sandpaper a little bit just to get all the fuzzy burrs and stuff off there. Especially on the top, you don't want anything there where your sealant's going to go. You want that nice and flat. So it looks like that drops in pretty good. So if you have one of these centering bits, it's a pretty handy thing to have. And if you don't, you can do it with a regular bit, but since I got it, I'm going to use it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark these 6 holes with this centering bit. And when I first do the install on this with the sealant, I'm probably just going to use some wood screws to start with, just to quickly get it fastened down into place, and then I can take them out one at a time, drill the hole out, put the machine bolt through with a nut, with the locking nut on the back side. So, and then it'll hold, the other screws will hold the thing in place while I'm monkeying around with it and make sure my sealant isn't getting spread all over the place. Plastic stuck in a bit. Okay. Now we're going to go over to the drill press and we're going to do the mod on this hatch so I can put these other 2 holes in here the way I want them. And then it'll be good for fastening down. Okay, so the flange is just a little more than 5/8 of an inch thick. So I'm going to actually use some 3/4 inch material to set this up on. Try to get it. Oh, I need something a little skinnier than that because it's a little too wide there. Oh, I can back this up a little bit maybe. Yeah. I'll put my 3/8 Forstner bit in there so I can make a flat bottom hole. And I think we're good to go here. We could go ahead and drill this out. Just want to come into it slow because it's cutting on this. There's a bit of a slope here, so it's going to cut that edge first. Just let it do its thing slowly. I'm just going to drill it down. Just enough that it's got a flat spot for the screw head to sit on. Actually, the way my drill press is set right now, I can't quite get all the way there, so I'm just going to let this bit down here just a little bit more, tighten it again. That way I don't have to change anything else on the drill press. Just want it deep enough to have a completely round, flat surface for the screw machine bolt to sit on. Okay, now we can go back to the kayak. Well, actually I could drill these out. I'll just drill those out with a hand drill now. I'll just put the 3/16 bit in the chuck, drill those 2 holes out, and then they're ready for the bolts. We can go back to the kayak and figure out what we're going to do with the foam to fill the gaps. This stuff I got is like really stiff, like it takes a lot of pressure to squish it. It's almost rubber like. I don't even know what it is for sure. It's got a 3M backing on it. So this one here is pretty thick, so what I did was I took 2 pieces and stuck them together back to back with the 3M, and then I just carved it down to fit. So the stuff actually cuts pretty nice on the table saw. So I kind of cut my blocks on the table saw, stuck them together, and then I just carved it with a utility knife. You know, carved off the corners and stuff a little bit to fit in the curves. And it fits in there pretty snug. It would probably almost seal without any sealant, but I'm going to have sealant all the way around it anyways. And then I made a little shallower one for the back here. So I'm going to put a couple screws in here just to keep this in place. These are just temporary screws. I'm going to put the actual machine screws in after. Actually stiffens the kayak up quite a bit here. The hatch is actually sturdier than what the kayak was before. Okay. So what's going to happen is we're going to put a bunch of sealant in there and it's going to squeeze out all over the place. So just to avoid having a bunch of mess, I'm just going to do this. This over around here. And just go around all this plastic here. See the markers coming off. I'm going to put a little bit more around on the hatch here too, just to kind of get into these grooves here so it sets right in there. Now back to the screws here. Lined up here. Now I can drill out some of these holes here for bolts. All the hardware I'm using here is stainless steel. Now I can just take my finger, just kind of go around here. Wipe that excess off there. There's all kinds of different sealants you can use. Some guys like to use silicone. I'm not a big fan of silicone on the kayak. I don't think the long term it holds up that well. Oh. This is an exterior grade sealant meant for siding and eaves troughs and that kind of stuff. Marine goop works really great on kayaks. Sticks like crazy, but it's quite difficult to get things apart later if you do decide to take something apart. This is not going to be, hopefully, in a submerged situation, so for water splashing in and then draining back out, it should be more than adequate for sealant. Okay, now we can get rid of this tape. there we are. There's our hatch installed. It's going to be nice to have access to this part of the kayak from here because I plan on putting my batteries and stuff underneath here. I'm not going to use the compartments at the front for the batteries. When I do my sonar install, I'm actually going to run all the cables and power and everything inside the kayak, and then have them come out over here next to where the sonar is going to be mounted on the slide tracks. Just a little cleaner install. I'm going to go that route. The compartments at the front are will be handy for other things, items that I want to have quick access to when I'm out fishing. Place to keep my phone, this and that. Okay, so hatch is in. So now let's address this height problem. So the bar is actually sitting on the hatch here, and there's space over here where it should actually be sitting on the kayak. So I've actually come up with a little solution for that. I think it's going to work good. Cutting board. Picked this up at dollar store for $9. I'm only going to cut a few strips out of it. It's handy material. This is high density polyethylene something. So you have to make sure that that's the material you get. This is like very rubbery kind of stuff. It takes cold very well. It won't crack in the cold. It won't, it won't crack from the weight of the chair on it. It's just a really forgiving material. It doesn't accept adhesive very well. That's the only problem. But what I'm going to do is, when I mount it to the kayak here, I'm actually going to use some marine goop, which is actually pretty good. It'll help bond it into place. But I'm also going to fasten it with some hardware through the kayak, and that'll keep them in place forever, pretty much. I don't think they'll ever move. So most of the weight is going to be down when you're sitting in the seat, pushing down on it. So it's quite slick material. When you slide your chair back and forth on it, it's going to move easy. It's not going to drag on this. So it should be a good product to use, good material to use for this. So that's what I'm going to go with. So I'm going to start preparing some pieces for that. I cut 2 strips out of that cutting board off the edges, the long edge, 3/4 inches wide. And this material, I forgot to say before, this is the thick cutting board that I could find, thickest one, and it's 7/16 thick, but it's adequate for what I needed to do here. Now, when I push down on this, the bar does not actually touch the, oh, I got the bolts tightened, the wing nuts tightened here. The bar doesn't touch the hatch, so that's good. Once I have these fastened in place, of course they'll stay there. Now, this is pretty good for lifting the seat up a little bit. Actually, it's lifting it up a little bit, but when you sit in it, you don't really notice that there's a lot of difference. I mean, we're only talking, less than half an inch, right? Half an inch. So, but now, as we pick the seat up out of the pockets where it normally sits, now we've got a little bit of the side-to-side play. Even when the wing nuts are tightened down, it still has some wiggle, side-to-side wiggle in it. So what I've done is just cut a couple pieces of wood here just to play with, just to practice, or just to do like a test fit. And this doesn't have to be like super snug on the sides, but about there someplace, kind of recreates that cradle. And then that takes the side to side out of the chair. So I'm going to make 2 more pieces, 3/4 inch wide. But these pieces here are only 5/16 thick. So I actually have to take that cutting board and just mill it down. I'm just going to mill the one edge down to 5/16 first, and then I'll cut my 2 strips out of it. Definitely a table saw is an asset when you're trying to accomplish some of this stuff. If you don't have one, maybe you know a friend that has one or something, you could get them to help you out. I've set the spacing for the blade here a little bit wider than what I want. It's a little bit more than 5/16. I'm going to do one pass like that first. Now this cutting board has kind of a natural curve to it, but it is pretty flexible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that against the fence with the bow out, and then I'm going to use my helper stick here, make sure I'm above the blade, and I'm going to just push this through here while pushing against the fence and keep that flat so that I get an even thickness all the way through. Set the blade height at 1 3/4 inches so that it gives me a little bit extra. When I cut my 2 3/4 inch strips out of there afterwards, I'll have just a little bit extra space to play with there. Now this is what's left of that piece of wood that I cut my test pieces out of. I'm just going to use that as my spacer to do my final set on the saw blade. It's just about perfect right there. And we're going to do the final pass to cut this to thickness here. My stopper set for 3/4 inch. These kind of cuts you could do on a sliding miter saw or something if you wanted to. Just getting that thickness is the tricky part for these last 2 strips. figure out the length that I want to make them, and then cut them to length, and round the ends off, and just about ready to start installing them. So I got my pieces all done here and drilled out. I used the same Forstner 3/8 Forstner bit to countersink these holes in the material. I want to make sure the screw heads are buried in there good so they're not going to get hit by the bar of the chair when it slides back and forth. They're going to be way down in there, so it's going to be good. Okay, so now first thing we want to do is kind of just set them up to where we want them. I'm just going to drop a couple screws in there just to keep that in place. Now I think if I use these two little wooden blocks that I had, it's kind of a spacer. Hold that down flat, push everything together. Using the marine goop. Good stuff. Don't need a super thick bead on there, just if it's about 1/16 of an inch thick, that's plenty. It's always good to put the cap back on this stuff right away because it does start to skim over pretty quick. I'm going to drop the screws through. Use the screws to line up my piece. Washer and lock nut on each one. So there we have it. The hatch install and the seat rise modification to clear the hatch. Looks great. So side-to-side play, or very little anyways. More than there was before at factory. Well, there's the hatch installed. Hopefully this video might help somebody if they're kind of up in the air about putting one in their pilot or not. There isn't really any videos showing how to do it, so hopefully this one will help. I'm going to do some more videos with this kayak, sonar install, and I have an idea for a DIY crate people might find interesting, and maybe down the road some more electronics like some switches, maybe some outlets for USB and such. But right now just basic rigging, trying to get it ready. Oh, there's an anchor trolley to go on too. Just trying to get it ready to hit the water here, because it won't be long and the lakes will be unthawed and it'll be time to get out. Appreciate you watching. If you like this kind of video, maybe check back with me some more, and there'll be some more videos on what to do with this kayak. I don't know if all my videos will be about kayaking or kayak fishing or kayaks in general, but maybe I'll make videos about other things that I do. Okay, thanks for watching. Take care.